I read the will with my hands folded on my knees, hearing the lawyer's voice like someone narrating a weather report, precise, untroubled, and indifferent. My name was a single comma in that legal sentence, Ayaan, followed by the verdict, nothing, everything left to Adam, the cousin who'd always been the real son. My chest unclenched with a cold, slow certainty. There was no gasp, no collapse, only a long, small click inside me where years of answering every call had finally shut itself off. At home that night, I opened my laptop as if checking the weather. The bank ledger was a map of all the roads I'd paved for them, mortgages, electricity, hospital invoices, payments that had become the quiet architecture of their lives. They called him Golden Boy. They called me dependable. When I graduated, my father's good job landed like a receipt slid across a counter. But when Adam entered a room, their faces turned incandescent. I learned to fold myself into the background until that folded life was ripped open by a single line in a document. I canceled the autopay without drama. There was a perverse finesse to the motion, no argument, no scene. Just the withdrawal of a hand that had been propping up the house for decades. The first text came in 2 weeks, transfer the mortgage. No hello, no plea, just entitlement. I typed one reply and left it, ask your real son. Silence tasted like possibility. Days crawled. My mother's voice when she called was not soft with worry but brittle with accusation. Don't be childish. We raised you. You owe us. The absurdity of it made something inside me lighten instead of break. Raised me? They used me. I listened to their panic the way you watch a storm from a porch. You feel the wind, you do not go into it. I read the will aloud once, quietly, like a verdict, and said, it was clear. Click. They had learned to live on my labor, now they were forced to live on Adam's promises. The mortgage slipped, the utilities went unpaid, notices stacked like falling dominoes. Every Friday I logged into public records and watched their names crawl toward auction. Adam didn't move. Of course he didn't. He had been raised on applause, not on sacrifice. When the texts turned frantic, we're being harassed, transfer something, my replies were rarer and sharper. Midnight messages, measured sentences. You should call your heir. I let their voicemails accumulate like evidence, you ungrateful child. After all we did for you. Do you want us homeless? Their words were ammunition against the past they'd built on my quiet compliance. Each accusation confirmed I was winning. Still, silence was not my only weapon. Revenge, I discovered, needed choreography. It needed time. It needed me to be patient enough to watch consequence unfurl like a slow bruise. On a gray Tuesday my mother texted, tone suddenly lubricated with fear, we shouldn't have done the will. We'll talk to the lawyer. Just please send the money. I curled my fingers over the keyboard and typed as though setting a trap, you made your choice. Now live with your son or die with him. Adam called, voice thin with panic and a surprise I relished, why aren't you helping? You know I don't have that money. For the first time I let my anger be audible, soft, surgical. They called you their son, their pride, their everything. Time to earn it, I said. I ended the call. Clean. Final. I didn't go to the auction. I watched strangers lift my parents' house like a relic at a pawn shop. Adam, the golden boy, sank under the weight of an inheritance he'd never wanted to carry. My parents moved into a cramped flat that smelled of perfumed surrender. Neighbors whispered. Relatives pretended not to see. I slept better than I had in years. The peace surprised me. I told myself that it was justice. I'd carried their cost until I could carry no more. I had been the one who kept their lights on, who paid their quiet humiliations away so they could bask in a brighter sun. Now the pedestal had toppled, and watching them learn gravity felt, for a time, like healing. Then the envelope came. It was not a bill or a plea. It was thick paper, handwritten in my mother's looping script. Ayaan, we always knew. You were the only constant. We thought we were doing right. I thought of removing it, burning it, or folding it into some neat proof of bitterness. Instead, I set it on the table and read it 3 times until the words rearranged themselves into something else. The twist was not in them. The twist was in me. I had believed I was giving them a punishment that matched their neglect. I had convinced myself the moral ledger would balance. But reading her confession, admission that all those years they had spoken of me in half-lights, that they had misnamed their affection, something unaccountable loosened. The quiet I'd curated swelled into a new realization. I had engineered a collapse that left them ruined, not enlightened. I had chosen to starve them of aid rather than force a conversation. I had let the house burn to teach them a lesson they might never learn. That night I did what I had never done. I called the lawyer. Slow, deliberate questions. Requests for records I hadn't needed before. I explained, minimally, that there were irregularities, a pattern of transfers into accounts that did not belong to Adam. The lawyer's voice shifted. Papers moved. A quiet investigation unfurled. Weeks later, the court files filled in the blanks. Adam had not been their golden son, he had been their convenient heir. His name on the will had been inked after late-night visits, after whispered phone calls, after signatures extracted under pressure. The inheritance had been a lie worn like a crown. My parents had been manipulated into believing generosity was thriving under their hands while someone else was siphoning trust into greed. I thought of the house being sold to strangers. I thought of my mother's handwriting admitting she'd known more than she let on. The knowledge that followed was not vindication. It was raw and jagged. Adam had been complicit and cowardly, my parents had been both victim and actor. And I, who had wanted them to feel the pain of their choices, had been the instrument that made the harm absolute. I could have remained silent and watched the system correct itself. I could have let the legal gears turn and Adam be exposed to public contempt. Instead, I stepped into the smallest, most humiliating act of mercy. I reversed the cancellation on one account and transferred enough to stall the auction for a week. I called the lender and asked for a stay while evidence was processed. I delivered the file the lawyer had compiled to my mother's inbox and then, for the first time in years, I drove to their new flat. They opened the door as if expecting a uniformed officer. Their faces were older, softer, stripped of the armor of certainty. My father's eyes darted away. My mother's hands trembled with the same motion she'd used to sign receipts for me. I put the file on the table. I did not lecture. I did not ask for apologies. I told them, simply, what the papers showed and what I had done. There was no cinematic collapse, no redemption scene. My mother wept with a howl that acknowledged both grief and shame. My father sat very still, The color leached from his face. Adam called twice in the next hour and I let it ring both times. In the weeks that followed, the estate hearings unfurled in public ways I had once coveted. Adam was named in a probe, my parents were subpoenaed, and the house, spectacle at last, was frozen until the truth could be tallied. My intervention had saved them from losing everything to strangers, but it had not saved them from themselves. They would have to face what they'd done, the choices made in pride, the blind worship of image, the way love had been rationed by favor. I did not expect gratitude. I got awkwardness, a brittle attempt at explanations, an old man's silence. I got a mother who said, finally, as if reading from a script she had never learned the courage to speak, "We were wrong about you." That sentence should have fixed everything. It did not. What it did do was change the geometry of my life. I stopped being only the ledger, the furnace that heated their home. I became the person who had acted and the person who had chosen restraint. I had engineered a punishment to make them feel small. I had also, in a quieter instant, engineered a pause long enough to begin repair. Months later, Adam was stripped of the will and charged with coercion. My parents, humiliated, started therapy with a counselor who specialized in elders and families. The house stayed in legal limbo, but the auction never happened. I moved out of a life built on tacit sacrifice and into a small rented flat where I paid my own bills and kept my own lights on. There are nights when rage still wakes me, sharp, hungry, righteous. There are mornings when I open my laptop and set an automatic transfer, not to prop anyone up, but to invest in the small comforts I was denied, a trip, a class, a bedspread that is mine. I do not pretend I acted nobly from the beginning. I do not want to canonize the way I let them suffer. I only know the truth that warmed me. I stopped being invisible. Revenge, I learned, can be ice, clinical, patient, lethal. But mercy, when deployed at last, is the same thing with a pulse. I stopped paying and watched the house wobble, then I stepped forward and eased the fall just enough to force an accounting. I took their silence and turned it into paperwork, into subpoenas, into a truth they could not sing away. Sometimes I wonder which of those acts will define me in their memory, the hand that withdrew support, or the hand that, at the cliff's edge, reached back. I have been both, and that is the thing I sleep with now, not peace so much as a clear ledger of my own making. I am not absolved. I am not proud in the old ways. I am simply awake, and for the first time in my life, I owe only myself the courtesy of being honest about it.